Pregame preview 296.
Well, this could be the last time that we're in the bunker, so we got to make it a big show.
Peroni, a Sam Summer Lager, or some Salt Point Moscow
What are you going to do? Oh, and I feel like we got a good card end of the year. 14 total fights on this card.
Where's the ball sucker?
I know that Morning Combat will ultimately prevail because the BC Luque dynamic, though I wasn't sure how that was going to play out over time, 520 episodes later, has proven to be a winner.
These are my two special needs friends.
Only way is one. Yeah.
And Showtime for me specifically has been there for decades. You know, I've been watching it, so it goes way, way back. And so it's a bittersweet moment, but I'm glad to be part of the last show in the bunker, Jersey City.
You know, we used to do these on the roof, and then they demoted us. And we just stayed down here in the basement. Hi, everyone. We are gathered here today to get ready for UFC 296, the last pay-per-view of 2023. The welterweight title's up for grabs. The flyweight title's up for grabs. There's a lot going on. Paddy Pimblett's back, Tony Ferguson, maybe some cucks like these two. Who's to say? It's time for the Morning Combat 296 pre-game preview. My name is Luke Thomas. I am merely one-third of your hosting duo. I'm joined by my two special needs friends. This is Chuck Mindenhall, the Iceman.
Already, man. This is good.
And there's Brian Campbell. Look at Brian Campbell, high as shit.
That's not true.
Put the solo cam on Brian Campbell's eyes.
Let's go. Enter into my living room.
Look at how high this man is.
Wow.
He's got 15 gummies in his tummy.
That would be untrue, but there are two things, though, guys, that I will guarantee to the viewers during today's episode.
Masturbation.
One, that I will interrupt Chuck more than a friend probably should.
Fan base knows that.
And two, that the expectation should be centered around one thing, Chuck. And that's real talk.
I like the dramatic pause.
Like men do. Which means don't bitch out on any tough question.
It's good that we're being fired. It's fair.
Quarters
This is in fact the last one of these we're going to do. Maybe not ever, but certainly in this studio, this will be the last one here. So, Iceman, any
Pre-game preview and a post-show, post-everything. It's like the
I'm sorry,
last
was
one.
that English?
It's pre-game, but this is the last one, so it's like.
Yes, indeed. Any favorite memories from these? Like when we used to do these on the roof, and then they were like, "Oh yeah, we'll do it on the roof again," and then we never did it on the roof again.
I like this area though because it's 23 layers underground. It's like 24 floors. It's pretty cool. I'll miss that.
Take me down, right? 6 underground, right? No.
BC loves the absolute war. Do you really like Creed?
No, Creed blows, but the first record, My Own Prison, still stands up to this day. I'm not saying it's a 5-star classic, but it's redeemable.
They
Dude,
only have the one song.
You don't know
Just
one?
Oh, okay.
No, My Own Prison, one.
Okay, it's 2 songs.
Torn, the first song. I mean, dude, it's kind of.
That was Natalie Imbruglia, right? Anyway, whoa. Hope everything's okay there. As I mentioned before, we're here to talk about UFC 296, but actually before we do that...
Are we giving too much head here? I'm not going to direct this well.
Why don't you take those stupid sex jokes and make it about something more interesting? Why don't you tell the folks what we have here on the table, the assortment?
Well, we wanted to honor a few different parts of our lineage and our history, and one of those things would be Brendan Schaub, who really helped greenlight us onto this side. So you got the Tiger Thick Whiskey right here, which is...
really good.
Actually, really pretty damn good.
It's surprisingly quite good, yeah.
We have the Cannibal Corpse Whiskey, which does not meet, surprisingly, the same
It hurts me
level.
to say this. You could actually fuel a tractor with that.
And this fantastic hat representing probably South America's second most forgotten country, and the first being Guyana.
I think it's a little strong.
Nobody's talking about Guyana anymore. But the thing about Colombia is you got to pronounce
Colombia,
it correctly.
not
because
Colombia.
When we have any debates about language in the world of UFC, we don't actually go to John Anik. We go to Luke's wife as the judge.
I mean,
jury.
if you
I'd
would
be more intimidated with his wife.
You know what's interesting is BC's entire worldview is based upon directly trying to not understand a word you're saying and then misrepresent it in the worst possible way.
Now, is it Cuba or Cuba?
Among friends, it's Cuba.
Okay.
All right, boys, let's get to it here for a little bit. Before we talk about UFC 296, which, by the way, main card completely stacked top to bottom.
Yeah.
Really interesting, good fights, important fights in a number of directions, 2 title fights. But first, as I mentioned, it is, in fact, the last pay-per-view of the year. Chuck Mindenhall, Iceman, you are our guest here on this program. Give me your sense of the UFC's 2023 in pay-per-view. We can go over some of the highlights.
Sure.
In no particular order. Izzy getting revenge on Pereira. The return of Henry Cejudo. Sean O'Malley beating Aljamain Sterling.
John Jones
made a return.
Yeah.
Granted, the fight was quite anticlimactic, but he did make a return. You
could have been worse anticlimactic if Gaunt had done that to Jones, I think. But Jones coming in and doing what he did made it.
It was a year of highs and lows for Volkanovski. Yeah. It was a year of, I would say, relative, but yeah, highs for Islam Makhachev in all different kinds of ways. So it was, it seems to me, not a year of gigantic, enormous fights, but a good string of very quality ones.
I think so, and usually when you kind of reflect on
the retirement of Amanda Nunes.
Exactly. Usually when you reflect on the pay-per-views and what has happened during the year, you might find 3 or 4 duds in the end. Like in retrospect, you look back and be like, well, that wasn't the greatest, or so many fights fell out that it just basically ends up in poor condition and doesn't deliver. This year, I think we got it. Like there was that 3-month stretch with Jones, and you mentioned Volkanovski and Islam, the first one. Those are good fights, man. And then toward the end, it's the unpredictability of the sport that started to stand out. You get Sean Strickland, you get Sean O'Malley, and these guys kind of breaking through. And that adds a whole new zest. So I thought it was a very strong year that way for pay-per-view.
And also, I'll just say this BC quickly. In terms of upsets, Leon Edwards is here because he had the upset over Kamaru this past year and then had to finish it off.
Yes.
Or pretty close. No, he was the last August where he beat him and then had to have the second fight this year. But as you mentioned, Izzy losing to Strickland, there was a series of big upsets that happened through the course of the year that can't be overlooked either.
No, and I know some people might be watching this and go, oh, well, wow, you guys did a lot of complaining about the UFC this calendar year. And I think, from a PR standpoint, not a great year. From a week-to-week depth, quality of cards, why are they watering down? I don't understand this. Maybe not the best. But big picture sometimes is what really speaks more to where the health of a promotion is at. In big picture, they nailed the big fights. We got 1 versus 2 pound for pound, more or less, with Volk versus Alex twice. We got great stories of who's retired and walked away better than what Amanda did, what Robbie Lawler did, who's had a comeback better than what John Jones did. I mean, we've had all those big moments. They have delivered even when they've been forced to scramble. They scrambled in Abu Dhabi and really made some big star value come back. Madison Square Garden, which lost such a key fight to bring over the casuals, they replaced that with bangers, good stories, breakthroughs from Tom Aspinall.
Exactly,
Alex Pereira having the incredible turn to his career that he's had this year. So you're right. It can be both things at once. It was a challenging year PR-wise, journalistically, but at the same time, they delivered the high notes that you would expect, and they are closing this calendar year with a pay-per-view card that, for whatever it lacks at the very top in terms of like that crossover reach, boy, do it hardcore top to bottom. They got us covered. I mean, they got us covered.
Chuck, how much do you like the 296 card?
I like it in terms of its depth. I mean, and I hate to say this because we do this all the time. We look at it from inside the bubble and we're like, man, there's a lot of good fights. But there really are. There are 14 total fights on this card, which is...
as of the time of this recording.
Yes. And I mean, that's enormous for the UFC standard. You're used to that in Bellator, but not the UFC. And I mean, I would say there's probably 6, 7 pretty compelling fights. I mean, all the main card looks good to me, and then you could pick out some on the prelims as well. It's just from top to bottom, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I would say it's great. I would say so as well. Then getting back to the previous topic very quickly, the UFC did have some things this year where, I mean, remember, like the year started off with Dana White and his wife in that altercation.
And then they shoved power slap at us.
And then the power slap stuff.
That feels like so long.
And it was fighter pay.
Fighter pay was a big one. Francis was a big one. And there's a lot of real consternation about the Apex. How much of the product is it? When they're on the road, the product does seem to be quite good. When they're not,
and then Bud Light got woke, and Kid Rock got armed, and like things happened, right?
So there was a reason for, I think, some mixed feelings about the UFC potentially as a brand. But I do think the pay-per-views, there's nothing that was super major on there, but everything was, for the most part, pretty consistently good, or at least in the case of Amanda Nunes, historically relevant. Which brings us, of course, to 296. When we talk about 296, we're headlined by Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington. So the natural temptation would be to start with Colby getting here because it kind of is the thing that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up as like something here doesn't fit. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to disrespect Leon that way. So why don't we actually start with Leon here a little bit? And one thing, BC, that I've been wondering is something that he made where when we were talking about Izzy, he was like, maybe this whole time it's been the Pereira story. And some of that is, they both had big moments with each other in this rivalry. But like, Colby and Kamaru definitely had an era. But maybe the real story, tell me if you think this way, is that the real story was that Leon was going to come out and sweep them both. What do you think?
It's been such an incredible turnaround for Leon. And in this calendar year to have a victory, for as much dramatic, historical relevance as the head kick heard around the world in their first fight was, you got to come back and do that a second time when you're automatically going to be the betting underdog again a second time. And he beats Kamaru Usman straight up.
And you recognize it immediately, too.
In a head-to-head fight,
and
and you start to realize that, okay, there is no fluke involved. This win streak is absolutely real. And oh, by the way, this guy's like deserving among the top 5 pound-for-pound best in the world. Then when that pound-for-pound list started to wiggle and go in different directions and some came and went, suddenly Leon's this consistent force in the middle that it's sort of like he has an opportunity to close what has been an incredible breakout year for him, in which he didn't just establish his name. That happened the first time he beat Usman, but he cemented his name critically amongst the best in the world, and now has an opportunity to beat a fairly popular character, which is why Colby's in this spot coming off his own pay-per-view victory against Masvidal. All of that seems like years ago at this point. Dude, boy, could he come out really in the Fighter of the Year discussion too
100%.
with a victory here. So you're right. We got the story wrong in terms of whose story this actually was. I want to see how good Leon can actually be, because this division's kind of in changeover right now. Are we in the midst of not just a handoff from one great champion to whoever's next, but really is this going to be the Leon Edwards era?
What a trajectory, too, because the guy there was a point, I don't know what his win streak got to, but there was a point where you're like, will he ever even get a title shot? It was sort of like the Beneil Dariush thing, where you're like, I don't know if he'll ever get there, and then
they might have to give it to him.
He may never get it, and he ends up getting it, wins dramatically, backs it up like you said. Now here he is in a situation where you could say, if he wins, he might be the best British fighter that we've ever had, right? I mean, like, you go from a guy who was behind the 8 ball to that, where I know we were debating maybe last year if Bisping should be in the Hall of Fame. We were doing this whole, this guy just kind of like kept going and keeps beating these guys. And when you really look at statistically and go back and watch the third Usman fight, I guess, in the end, but the last Usman fight, the way he won that fight and just picked apart, like, you know, the second time where he was down 10 minutes of control time, this time 5, outstriking him. I mean, the economy strikes, it was something like 75% of his strikes.
He was better in every category.
He was a sniper. And then you kind of look at the Colby thing and you're like, okay, this should be interesting given their styles. But I really think that this is Leon's story in the end. It's a very strange turn of events, and here we are.
I would say Colby's not had an era as anything other than a big time and relevant, but B-side.
Yes.
He's been a relevant B-side. Kamaru did have a moment. Kamaru really did have a moment 100%. Where he was the guy.
He was pound for pound king. That matters.
Sure. And this crazy undefeated streak in the comparisons to St. Pierre became quite common, whether they were fair or not. So he really did have a moment. But the point I wanted to make was, Leon was maybe the guy kind of waiting in the wings to come and then sweep that era away as who was going to replace them? Old age and then who? I did not know Leon Edwards was probably going to be that guy, but it seems like he is poised to do so.
I think sometimes the guys like that build something in their scaffolding during that rise because they're not getting the recognition. This was a guy that was booed in his home country during the Darren Till fight when he was like, why am I not getting loved like Darren Till? They were booing him in his home country. For him to kind of turn it around and end up in this position where I think vicariously his town in England, like they got behind him. It's a blue-collar town where there's not a ton of hope in this place, and I feel like all of a sudden he's opened the doors there. The UK is behind him. I feel like the American public, at least the diehard fans, have paid attention to his story. It's a crazy turnaround, but I do wonder if that chip on his shoulder, he keeps it shined, and he says every time he goes into these fights, you know what I mean? Like GSP had that. He lost that original fight, and it was like he just never went complacent. He never went complacent. I feel like Edwards is in that space a little bit.
It's not just that Edwards was overlooked. When he got the 2-piece and change and a side of fries from Masvidal, like he got punked. He never got rebuttal, and Masvidal ended up packaging that and parlaying that with the incredible knockout of Askren to essentially steal his spot in terms of momentum in the rankings and in the title picture. That led, because of Masvidal's name, for him to get 2 chances, obviously, because the first one was last minute. Remember what happened there. But it all helped in the delaying of Edwards finally getting his moment, and why sometimes as an aggressive American fight fan and journalist do I dismiss across both sports the British at times and don't take them seriously. Well, it was hard to take them seriously after that Masvidal incident. True or false? Like
you're right.
Like he got the worst end of it, but it was as if Masvidal was able to lap him without actually fighting him, even though he actually.
Okay, but that was also the day that Masvidal knocked out Darren Till. Right.
So what I'm saying is that set him back, and then the Nate Diaz close-up, which was supposed to be Edwards' chance to show us how great he is, he almost loses it.
Point.
The Bilal fight, where no contest, right? So it was sort of like it's one constant, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. So the fact that he through all of that came around and is able to have his moment now,
All through one
truly
hit.
shows you how great he had to be to
He's
pull
going to
this
lose a
off.
decision. We're like a couple minutes from him losing a decision, and we're not even talking about Leon anymore.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, and he gets that head kick.
So
It's just a crazy
He was
story.
going to be the guy from the first fight, which was just another guy
Right.
in Kamaru's story.
So
Exactly.
here's my question about the story of this card and this main event. Is the story about this Leon finally getting his due now that he's the A side against someone who's designed to be the trash-talking B side? Or are we overlooking the potential trap fight elements of what the Colby Covington
We
does at his
generally
best?
we generally
And
do this,
do we
I
have reason to once again downplay Leon's potential here and go, well, actually, if Colby can hold him down for X amount of time, what do you
Right.
think about that?
I want to say this about Leon. He was a guy I didn't naturally always respected when you would watch his fights against Gunnar Nelson, when you would watch all the guys he fought. You could tell this is a skilled operator. This is an experienced fighter. He is good. He knows what he's doing. But to me, it wasn't till the second and third Kamaru Usman fights that something grew out of him. Something he shed like a skin and became a much, not just an overall better technician. He really leveled up with that. But his competitive mindset and the confidence driving him really seemed to change. He turned a major corner with that rivalry and became something
There's a stat
new.
from that. He landed 33 more strikes, throwing 44 less blows,
Wow.
which is crazy.
That is
and that, I
crazy.
mean, his percentage is just, it's sniper level.
Right.
Like the way he looked in that last fight. That's why when you look at the Colby fight, you can point out what Colby does well, but now I'm looking at what does Leon do well and how does
Right.
Colby come at that?
And
you
so
know?
this is the interesting question that BC raised, which is, what's the appropriate angle to view this fight? It really depends. It depends on whether or not you think Leon Edwards is that guy to come and be like, I'm going to wash away the old rivalries anew, or you think Colby has been biding his time, fought 2 times in 2019, once in 2020, once in 2021, once in 2022, and this is going to be once in 2023, right? Has been very inactive, waiting just for the right time.
and getting it.
Right, exactly.
And this time it had to get to the almost egregious level, right? The company had to
Wait,
really
time
say.
out. Hold on. Okay, so we can just talk about Colby here a little bit now.
Okay.
All right.
So look, it was egregious to a large degree of the efforts the UFC went to give Colby this title shot. But where a couple years, it feels like almost removed from this Jorge Masvidal pay-per-view main event when the last time we saw him, where do we expect Colby to be? Aging in his late 30s. Because here's the deal. The knee-jerk casual fan in me goes, well, if Edwards didn't get dominated by Usman's wrestling in the rematch when he had a second time and the trilogy, which is their title rematch, which if he had even more time to know what Edwards can do and go back to his strength and still Usman couldn't overtake him with that, how is Colby going to go overtake him unless there's an evolution of Colby's striking game in the long time off that we don't see coming? Is that possible? Old dog, new tricks. Is it possible that Colby's going to surprise us or Edwards is going to be ready for this wrestling attack?
I mean, both things. I think he's going to be ready for whatever he brings in there, but at the same time, there's a little bit, man. When Colby gets rolling, like really gets into a flow with his like pressure striking and just moving forward and just winging, it's pretty crazy. It's like he's blitzing for 15 or 25 minutes in this case, if he's able to get by with that. That Robbie Lawler fight, remember, it was like 180 strikes he landed on him in that 15 minute whatever it was. It's just crazy when he gets rolling like that. I just don't know if he'll be able to find that kind of rhythm. I think
I'm surprised that, not that people have confidence in Colby. I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. But that after watching the second Usman fight, you can be like, oh, Edwards is just going to get run over. Word? I just don't understand how you could be like crazy confident in Colby given what he's up against.
This has been ongoing since we've covered this sport. Like
Yeah.
the people who like wrestling and really think that can be the dictation and the key.
donks, I call them.
Yes, the donks.
diggity.
He doesn't
Or the
mean
donks.
pro wrestling.
No, but when they can dictate the space like that and get you
Donks
down
do.
and hold you down,
Yeah.
people tend to think like they're always going to have an advantage against a striker, with a primary striker, right? So this has been ongoing. I just think that it doesn't. I don't think it works in this case. You know.
No, I guess I don't understand.
No, I'm saying a lot of people believe that wrestlers, really proven wrestlers, guys who can get you down and kind of hold you down, they'll have an advantage against a striker, like
Yes.
a guy like this, and that therefore that's how they envision it. It's
Oh,
a
I see.
simplistic
Yes.
way to look
This
at
is
it.
a
But
different Leon, though.
Yeah.
But this is a different Leon. That's
This
what I'm
is an
saying.
evolved
it's
Leon.
It's one of those things that I think it's an evolved. The people who really have paid attention probably have the better evolved idea of why Leon should be able to dictate the fight. You know what I mean? It's just he's evolved, but the sport has evolved as well.
Colby Covington currently sitting at 35 years of age, BC. He'll be 36, I think, in February. So he's almost there, right around the corner. But he's only fought in these very, minimalist
That's
times.
what I'm saying. What the hell could we expect from him? A dramatic leveling up in his striking.
I think you're going to get what you've been getting with him.
I think so, too.
The guy in the Masvidal fight, probably something pretty similar-ish
So
to
this
that.
does feel like, let's be very fair, the feeling we had heading into the second Usman-Masvidal fight, right?
Yeah.
Because it's different in the second Usman-Covington fight because Covington was so close in that first one
Yeah.
and did outstrike him on the feet, and they never took the fight to the ground like we expected, so there was some need. If we remember, nobody wanted to see Usman-Masvidal 2. It was all about, well, he's only getting this because. Colby is right now only getting this because. What did Masvidal come in there? He came in there, gave a decent effort, got freaking laid out with one punch by Usman. Are we prepared or expecting at all that this could be pretty one-way traffic from Edwards in a striking display of excellence, and that's really, at the end of the day, what this is about?
No.
Getting his brand to the next level and using what's left of Colby on the transaction.
Colby even got Usman down. So did Leon.
Yeah.
Leon's gotten him down too. But Colby got him down. There will be moments, no doubt in my mind, Edwards is going to be fighting off the takedown for long stretches. Like, I don't see how you can imagine a world where that doesn't happen.
I agree.
Colby's going to get eaten alive on the field as long as it lasts.
There's a danger, too, to like the way you're talking because this was the Sean Strickland. I mean, I just look back to the previous time. We talk about these guys and we're like, I just don't see it. I don't see how this is going to happen.
No. I mean, here's the case for Colby. The case for Colby is that even at roughly just shy of 36, he's going to have great cardio.
Yeah.
His game, like, for the people saying, well, he's not been active, which is true, but he's not really trying to change his game, right? I mean, he wants to get better over time, but he's not trying to be like the most well-rounded fighter he can possibly be.
If he had switched brands from Trump to DeSantis, that would have showed us that.
Yes, that would have been more of a switch.
Wrinkle.
But the thing is this, he's got a formula, and he sticks to the formula. He tweaks it a little bit, he adds a little bit here or there, but he's got a formula. He doesn't need to be as active as other fighters for that reason. The case for Leon is that, as I mentioned previously, if you go back to especially that third Kamaru fight, the level of takedown defense is extraordinary. Right. And that's going to be a stiff resistance for a guy like Colby, but Colby has,
he handles himself so well, too. Guys become champions sometimes, and how they handle themselves, you pay attention to, and a lot of times those guys will lose their titles. I just feel like he's stayed out of the thing. The whole Garry thing that was going on, I feel like he protects his gym. I feel like he's holding himself up. It's just weird. I feel like he's
saying this is a matured Colby Covington?
No, I'm saying that Leon. I'm saying Leon is like he's got like something about his demeanor that I like. Like it just seems like he's not putting, even if we want to start to praise him, he's not doing that. I think he's just confident and he's a very even-keeled guy.
Well,
who just
the
keeps
Rocky
it that
nickname actually works. It actually
for him
fits.
it does.
It's
I think we had this discussion because I was like, you've never had a guy with a closer Rocky story than he's actually had.
Point. It's a great point.
Well, in any case,
I had more of like a Rocco story. Court is in session.
There we go.
And hey, we are drinking, by the way, Moscow Mules, brought to us by Salt Point.
are they any good?
Very nice.
Luke is drinking his own sweat.
Could use some ice, but it's okay.
I'm drinking urine.
Yeah.
I'm drinking urine.
Yeah.
Dude, have you never had the Cannibal Corpse one?
I have actually. I think.
Do you think
tried
we can
it.
get Chuck to do a shot of it?
Dude,
No,
Slurricane, strong enough to start an engine, man.
I mean,
that thing is.
The label kind of tells you everything right here. I decided.
I will say this about the, I don't drink much anymore, but I will say that the Tiger Thick, little on the sweet side. Little on the sweet side.
Good,
but
though.
Good.
Okay, since we
like a
ask
hybrid or
since we ask a lot of you on this segment, not just
Yeah.
to allow yourself to get cut off so often, but really to answer the tough questions, the hard questions.
All right.
If you got an opportunity to do like a long form expose and feature on Coach Craig Jones, but he said you must enter no Spears country to do it, would you take the would you take the risk? You know
I would
what
do anything so long as it doesn't compromise.
How many times have you paid for sex?
Because you went into a Turkish
Dude, I asked a buddy of mine that the other night.
Turkish bathhouse.
His answer was a couple dozen.
Oh my God.
A couple dozen.
because you followed Douglas Crosby into a Turkish bathhouse, so you'll go to extremes.
Russian bathhouse.
not just because he was in a hurry, right? Like, yeah.
You go where the story is.
We
That's
have to
what you
move the conversation along, but it's a decent segue into the co-main a little
really?
bit here. Yeah.
Crosby, I
which
wonder what-
is Raw Dog. Brandon Royval is back. taking on a man. Taking on a
Get
man
that nickname, right? Yeah.
who had a lot to prove in his last fight in Alexandre Pantoja, the flyweight champion. But let's start with the Raw Dog side, only because I want to use it as a segue. BC, you spoke to Brandon Royval.
Yes.
This is his second crack at this gentleman. He lost before he was stopped. What do you know about Brandon Royval? Who is he? Tell the audience. Imagine of course they know, but imagine they don't. Who is this?
It turns out the way I've been framing him the last few years is actually correct, and here's the idea. Brandon Royval is a two-way finisher. He's a great submission expert, loves to brawl, loves to has knockout punches, but he fell far too much in love in certain parts of his initial rise with being that crowd-pleasing badass, which getting himself into those wars, and it had dramatic finishes. It also had a couple dramatic finish losses in succession as well. The rebirth that he has felt since losing his last fight, which happened to be against Pantoja, who's now champion, is because he's taken it more serious. Like Gaethje, who made that same great adjustment after losing to Alvarez and Poirier.
Same city, isn't it?
Right, where you turn back a little bit of the recklessness, but you don't do it to the level where you sacrifice the danger. And now what you have is a stone cold killer, a guy who goes in there with plan and intention and can still deliver it, can get a little bit dirty and hairy, can lure you into the same type of, let's just say, chaos, but is finding out how to swim better within that chaos. Knowing that this division is hot potato right now, in a lot of ways, right? Post Henry Cejudo, it's been kind of hot potato in that regard.
Yeah.
Anyone can win this. He is fully capable of winning this, especially since we have a champion who, while impressive in doing it, had to just bite down to get there, right? Had to endure like crazy. For a guy that's kind of known as a submission expert, Pantoja went in there and just brawled his way to a title. He's a little bit older, too. It's a rematch. Live dog, but live raw dog, if you know what I'm talking about.
How much has he told you he hates condoms?
So that's the thing. I did not expect to interview him. Have you ever interviewed him?
I've never had.
As a fellow Coloradian, as you would say, right?
Yeah. I am a Coloradian.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
He was so hilarious and was so prepared for MK style of humor and had so many one-liner comebacks that I'm like, MK approved. Let's get him in.
Nice.
Let's get him on the couch with Billy Q and Steamroller
God.
and Sean Brady, and we can Chiesa, and we'll bro out apparently white guy style. But that's just the way the hand was dealt. Okay.
I get it.
Yeah. Anyway, where were we? Probably on something cool.
Tell me about Brandon Royval.
He said he's a live raw dog.
So here's the deal.
Does he hate condoms?
He is feeling that point that he knows it's coming together now. This is his time, which is cliche, but it's the whole idea, Luke, of just turning it back just enough, not fighting for the fans, fighting for yourself. And look at that difference. And right now, really, there just might be a parting of the seas where it actually is his time. Am I talking out of my ass? How much do you give him a chance on Saturday?
It's a tough fight. Pantoja's already beaten him. Pantoja's a finisher. He's got excellent back attacks. That's kind of what he's famous for, although as we've seen, he could do a lot more than that, it turns out. So here's the problem. It's like Royval's game is a little bit built on quick draw, kind of lure you into mistakes as I go from attack in a consistent chain over time. But against Pantoja, who's got better like fundamental jiu-jitsu, although Royval's jiu-jitsu is good, but Pantoja's a little bit better, that game just doesn't work on those guys. It just doesn't work on those guys.
So much of it. I mean, he's up there in like submission attempts, you know.
Yes.
And so much of that won't work. That's my only thing. I'm like, I don't know if you're going to get Pantoja that way. But we'll see.
Well, he's got to level up to win the championship here, but we just saw Sarukian against Kiriush.
I mean,
just go to another level than I think here's my question. Is Royval of that same ilk where when and if he can put it all together, does he already have the tools to be great and be a champion? I think yes. I think
he's got a chance if he contradicts his tape. Because if you go watch his tape, you're going to be like, oh, well, this is what we got to do, right? But if he is actually evolving and he's doing what you said, how you set this up, I think he's got a better chance.
Yeah.
I'm still favoring Pantoja.
I mean, I could have misread the interview and he's just having a lot of unprotected sex, and that's why he has that nickname, and it's just going to be
That's
reckless.
probably what happened, but
you know.
Like, yo, fuck condoms.
Yeah.
I will say though, you're right about the division at 125. It's the Moreno was a mainstay, even winning or losing. It was the Figueiredo stuff. Then he had this fight. Now he's going to have a different path here later. But this fight has been, or excuse me, this division has been really fun, Chuck. It's not been, we've not been lacking for entertainment.
100%.
But there's not a guy there
That's
that we
true.
can say is the guy.
And it's kind of crazy in this division, like the big knock on it when they were trying to get rid of it back in the day. Look at this guy going for it. Back in the day when they were trying to cut it off and we're not going to have flyweight, was that there weren't a lot of finishes. Like if it's fast action, but people weren't expecting finishes per se. And now you get guys, I think 6 of 7 fights for Royval have been a finish. Either he's going, it's feast or famine, right? Like he's either going out or he's winning it. And you put that in the Pantoja's had a bunch of finishes. I feel like that this is a fun one in that sense. It's going to be a fun, but I agree with you guys. I think it's like the light heavyweight back in the day before John Jones, where it was like one guy would get it, next guy would get it, and that guy would beat him. Remember that? So I feel like we might be in that space right now. So I think that could happen for that reason.
Does this division remind you of college at all?
Flyweights?
Finishes just left and right? Just right. You know what I mean? There's a guy named Raw Dog in the title fight. It's like, been there, lived that life. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Man.
That was a little. That
wasn't losing.
You know what they,
Jizzing in your car alone does not count.
You know what they used to call that coital roulette where I come from. You know.
What?
I just made that up on the fly.
I was going to say that's
you can bring that back to your own friend
Naugatuck
group. Yeah. You know, I was born in a factory town. You know.
Pantoja here joins us after the Moreno fight when he had this like haunting moment after his fight where he looked in the camera and asked his, I guess, somewhat estranged father, not totally as I understand it, but somewhat estranged, are you proud of me now? And that one shook me. It's not often this point where I can see violence or hear someone just say something in the English language 100%. So simple and it just rock you to your core. That one got me. That one got me like big time. Yeah. I wonder what you made of that, what it did to you. It sounds like you had a similar experience to me. I was,
because
I wasn't exactly disturbed. I was so deeply saddened.
Well, it was deeply saddening, and it was just out of nowhere because I didn't know his story. Nobody really knew what was going on. And sometimes you see a performance like that, and you're like, man, he really dug deep. For him to follow it up with something like that was like, whoa, what's been going on? But I think it's almost literary because you're like, you know, you're looking at like Fathers and Sons or something where a guy like shows up and he's saying something like that. That's a pretty profound thing. That opens up a lot of layers, doesn't it? Like you hear something like that.
Mark Kriegel of Top Rank ESPN would love to write a father-son feature about this story.
That would be the perfect guy actually for that. But yeah, I've had the same thing. I think that's a very powerful thing. I mean, obviously, father-son dynamics, and this guy's in there fighting, and he's telling you something about his story, the heart of his story, without telling you the rest. There's something about that.
I wish he was like, wasn't easy to be a scared white boy in a black neighborhood.
Yeah, leave it to the white guy to do karaoke over the Brazilian guy's life story.
Here's where I'm nervous.
Just paving right over it.
Here's where
hold on, I want to say something.
No, I'm nervous for Pantoja and his title reign. Do you want me to tell you why?
Tell me why.
The way that he won it was so a little bit out of character, right? Because we know him as a submission expert, and how he won it was essentially by outwilling Moreno, by biting down more on the mouthpiece, by willing to take.
He's become a better striker over time.
True, but this was not even about striking; it was about chin and will. So what I'm saying is, he may have poured it all out in the biggest night of his career. And I'm not calling him a Buster Douglas moment, but I'm using that as an example to say the Buster Douglas that beat Mike Tyson a week after his mom died was going to be a different version of him than any other. I just worry for him when we're already in a division that has a hot potato title and there's so much parity and anybody can win and everybody's dangerous. You're in your mid-30s, right? What is he, about 34, 35?
Yeah, something like that. Mm-hmm.
He just absolutely poured the jug out and gave everything that was deep inside.
That's a good point.
Pulling from literally pulling from his father not loving him or being there, from like literally pulling the deepest level of emotion possible, and your reward.
Like that you get once. You don't get that all the time. You know?
Can you pour that out exactly the same way again and have that same buy-in and that same emotional and toughness? Or what about the toll on that? And now you're fighting just another hungry guy who's looking to do the same thing, make everything right in their career in one night. I just, knowing how Royval's a finisher.
Did Royval ever say in his words what went wrong against Pantoja the first time?
He did. I don't have it in terms of memory, but he looks back at it as sort of like that was the last stop on the old journey when I was doing things wrong, and that loss essentially made me wake up to where I needed to be. You know.
Yeah, I don't think this fight though is setting the fans on fire. Like, I mean,
I understand that. Yeah.
Like, I hate even bringing this up with the flyweights because it's so old at this point. Everyone kind of gets it. But this is not a star attraction. This is done to make the fight card better. It's certainly going to add a lot of. I mean,
it could not be a main event unless it was a
fight night.
Yeah.
And Royval is going to make it exciting. Pantoja, we know he's great for it too. I don't have any concerns about the fight. But if we're looking at how it's built, this is the one that's adding quality, but not any star quantity. I think you would agree?
Yes, I agree with that 100%.
I would agree with you.
Yeah.
All right, which takes us
But
now.
at least it's better than Pennington versus
oh boy,
Bueno Silva.
Bueno, so you love Bueno Silva.
Not a great title fight.
Is that on this card too?
No. That's
not a main
That's
event.
in the new year. That's in the new
It's
year.
in Toronto. They got lucky.
Sorry, Canadians.
Poor Toronto. Poor Calgary.
Cold in the winter.
Yeah.
Cold in the winter. Which takes us to this next fight on this card, which just makes me the happiest man alive.
You love this dude.
It is the return of my personal hero.
Wow.
Shavkat Rakhmonov is back, ladies and gentlemen. 17-0, 17 fights, 17 wins, 17 finishes. That's all he knows. He is taking on Wonder Boy, Stephen Thompson. Now, of course, we know you've got a welterweight title fight in the main event, and now you've got Rakhmonov versus Wonder Boy. I mean, could the UFC set this up any clearer? They've got the fight on the same card, same division. Rakhmonov, who is a fucking destroyer of worlds, against this old name that everybody loves, who's 40, basically. It's a number one contender fight, is it not?
I think so, and it almost feels like Wonder Boy must have really rubbed the UFC the wrong way with that whole thing, because I don't know how you end up in this spot, man. Even though, like, you're like, oh, if you get through him, you know, you might have a title.
He's like, I know they owe me one more fight. Let's see who it is.
I know.
Oh,
He's playing it up like, you know, it's just a guy, didn't even know who he was, start paying attention, he's good. But I'm like, dude, this is the guy we've all seen coming for a long time, and it'll be very interesting to see how he handles this. But, you know, you look at Wonder Boy, he's going to be 41 in February. You know, the Wonder Boy nickname now at this point feels a little funny.
No, Wonder Man, please.
Wonder Man.
Sorry, go ahead.
But I mean, that's a tough task for him.
Dude, let me serious question. Yeah. What makes Shavkat Rakhmonov awesome? What makes him awesome?
That he wears the head of dead animals that he killed on his own head, the fur of them. That makes him awesome. No, he did have that one question fight, right?
The Jeff Neal fight.
The Jeff Neal fight, which turned out to be interesting. In what way? Because he was getting a little reckless and getting lit up in that.
But he ultimately took control of that fight in the end.
But overall,
he finished him with this kind of bulldog choke from the side like this, and then had to wrap his legs to hold him.
Even if he's not looked at in a one-strike power sense as a Triple G Gennady Golovkin, he has a Golovkin-like ability to efficiently execute in the most violent and powerful way possible. His mind is way ahead of even the spectacular control that he puts out and does it. So when I know he has that backbone, that special backbone that happens to come a lot in that region of the world for sure, but it can show up anywhere. But he has it, dude. He has the intangibles.
It's like Charles Bronson. But he's like a hitman, right? Like he just shows up. He doesn't really have expressions.
Yes.
Like he just goes in there and does his job, and every time you're like, damn.
And by the way,
he seems to smile through pain.
What did you think about this? Earlier today, and it already aired live on Morning Combat, but we had Sean Brady, welterweight contender, on here, and I asked him, saying, when you look at the styles of this division and who's out there, is there one fighter that's the worst style matchup? Meaning, who's going to do the best job at shutting down what you do great? And he was like, yeah, Shavkat Rakhmonov.
Really?
So that's basically telling you that people are starting to look at him as the truest boss at the end of the video game, the badass, the one who will probably be champion soon. So if you're Wonder Boy Thompson and you're, into betting, whatever, like, what do you do? What is possible here for Wonder Boy? Is the best case scenario that you lose a competitive decision? Is that the best case scenario?
Well, I want to get to that in just a second, but just to finish up on Shavkat, we mentioned it before, 17 fights, 17 wins, 17 finishes.
What in the UFC, like 6 or something?
Something like that. I think he's only had, in the whole course of his career, only 2 fights even go to the third round, of course, winning both of them by stoppage. He's just a murderer, an absolute murderer in the best case possible. And he's got interesting evolutions about him, too. Like, he's real good in the clinch with throws. He's got good wrestling. Yeah. He's got an interesting style of ground and pound where he doesn't follow them to the ground. He kind of bends over at the waist, and they don't know what's coming or going, and he tags.
It feels like he's inventing new strategies as he's implementing them. You know what I'm saying? Like, he may be the guy that takes us a little bit closer to the next level of the
to the point you raised about the Jeff Neal fight, which did be like, well, he got tuned up a little bit there on the feet. A, he persevered. B,
a disaster,
he turned out he could take a shot like it was nobody's business.
That's the thing that it told me.
Right.
He could take the shot, too.
Hungry for the business. Hungry.
It's like Chimaev against Gilbert, where it's like you wouldn't have written it that way, that it went that way, but at least you got to show us exactly who he is, and you're like, okay, still that dude.
Like absolute
what would you point to as a weakness of his so far?
So he would walk into range and get lit up and stuff like that. And it's like, you could do that in your late 20s. You're not going to be able to do that for much longer. And especially against some of the guys, like Leon Edwards will set your ass on fire for that if you just walk into range on him, right? So there's stuff like that. But in terms of like the special qualities, he's got the it factor times 1,000. To your point, even though he doesn't speak English, he just looks the part. Do you really believe that? You kind of joked about it, but I wonder if you really believe about it. Like how Wonder Boy found himself in this position. Supposed to have a fight. It fell through. His opponent missed weight.
Yeah.
It was Michel Pereira. Right. And he didn't want to take the fight. So there was this whole big media cycle about whether he was going to get paid. Should he get paid? Same thing that happened to Tony Ferguson in one of the Khabib fights. I was there for cover when he was cutting weight and he missed it.
It's kind of crazy to think Wonder Boy getting punished for any reason, but the UFC is a little strange in how they conduct. We've seen stuff like this before. I really believe that this Wonder Boy has a name, and he's up there where the in the rankings they can justify if Shavkat's able to go through him, you could give him the title shot. I think it's all that. You could take his juice. It's a good matchup for him. It's all of that stuff. But I do think that there had to have been a little bit of something there for Wonder Boy to draw this card. I mean,
here's the thing I come back to. It's like every time we have one of these fights, I'm always like, okay, what does it mean for if X wins? And then what does it mean if Y wins? And it's like, I'm not saying it wouldn't be great for Wonder Boy if he beat Shavkat Rakhmonov. But clearly this is all set up for Rakhmonov to push him out of the way.
That's exactly right.
And then move to the front of the line. And so you're even wondering, what would it mean for Rakhmonov to lose against basically a 40-year-old BC? It'd be a fucking disaster.
Yeah, I mean, could you repair it and come back around again? Yes, but he's at a point right now where the timing is right. The momentum is there. He's shown us enough of who we might really be that's why we have to have the realest of real conversations and the kind of talk, again, that only men do, and that's why we do it here. Is if I asked either of you who's going to be the welterweight champion in 1 year from now, I could almost guarantee that your answer is either going to be Shavkat or Leon Edwards, right? Because let's give Leon his credit. He's within, I think I have him like number 4 pound for pound in the world right now.
He's quite good.
The way that it went down that way.
That's same with us, yeah.
How much stock would you put into the chance that a year from now, instead, the champion could be Bilal or Jack Della Maddalena or Sean Brady or Islam Makhachev? Is there any chance that it's not Leon or Shavkat a year from now? What do you guys think about that?
Those are some rough customers, but man, I think that it is. I think it really does come down to those two guys. I think so. I mean, especially Shavkat. I just think that he's that guy.
I think the kind of fight that Volk gave Islam the first time, but he lost. I think Makhachev could give Shavkat something like that, but lose.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Interesting.
But like, who's the guy? Who's the guy you look at? If Leon can stop Colby's attacks, and so then you're like, well, Colby's wrestling game won't work at the top anymore. Then you go to Shavkat. If he wins, who would you pinpoint as the guy to beat him? I guess you could say Della Maddalena.
Right.
But you would want to see it, and more to the point, like how they're going to attack each other in the clinch. You're like, there's real intrigue about how it will go.
Yeah.
But there's nobody you're like, oh, that's the guy. That's the guy that's going to beat his ass.
Do you think you would have been that guy in prison who's like fresh meat on a Sunday night when like the new
just serving up your butt,
the new bitches come in,
face down, ass up every time.
No.
First thing I do
is
make them toss my salad, right?
Last thing on this, if I may.
With jelly.
Okay, stop. Talk about eating your ass.
He ratchets it up for these shows.
He does. We were talking about what Leon might be doing if he ends up beating Colby, ushering out that old era. Shavkat would be helping him in beating Wonder Boy. They would both be kind of showing them the door.
That's the idea, right? You ever talk to Joe Silva back in the day, and he would talk about this very thing. He's like, you're always priming the guys to come up and take those guys' spots. That's the whole thing. It just keeps the cycle going. That's what they want to happen.
Right.
If Colby somehow wins, though, and Shavkat wins, I don't see Colby fighting Shavkat anytime soon.
Oh, the promotion would make him in a second.
I mean, it would
He could say no.
But I'm telling you, this is the kind of stuff.
Okay, but the
I feel like that's always the tricky side.
The transitional, not a lengthy champion, the transitional champion, which would allow the title to go back to the White House, but or something like that. But 2, it would allow an opportunity to say, okay, well, who's next? We will use Colby to put them over, and that would be Shavkat. Unless Jack goes on some kind of insane calendar year next year, unless Sean Brady keeps elevating to next levels, or unless Islam gets his shot, which is why it brought him into the conversation. I don't know. I mean, it is the hot thing to do right now to become a champ, or at least try to become that. It's back being the hot thing to do.
I'm exhausted by it, though, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm tired of it.
Dude, this is a different event, but I saw Dricus du Plessis, who's going to be fighting Sean Strickland.
I saw this.
Dricus du Plessis, again, he might win. I'm not suggesting he won't win, but as it stands today, he is not the champion.
Right.
And he was already talking about becoming double champ if he beats Sean Strickland. I'm like, holy shit! Like,
you down with DDP?
I am.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now for the ladies, right?
All right. So now we get to the sad end of the card, or at least the.
Is this a Ferguson reference?
Yeah. Not just that. Like the next 2 fights are they're both good fights.
Speaking of sad, do you know he got hit on at the train station this morning?
I did, right? Yeah.
You know what the lady said? That Luke has body for days.
That could be taken a lot of different ways.
If RJ Gangbanger does not make a body the number 4 DAYZ t-shirt right now, right?
Dude, that is a good shirt.
Yeah.
With loose glasses around.
She was a big fan. She was a big fan.
You know what she thought? that it's possible that he's not just a regular honky, that there might be like some Armenian blood in there, which means he might have himself a Jeff Hahn. You know what I'm saying? He might have it like.
Or mistake you for a furry. Furry conventions are fun.
Have you been to one?
I was at the UFC in Pittsburgh. The hotel had a furry convention going on while we were there.
I'm sorry, what?
The UFC in Pittsburgh.
Was this the Nate Marquardt one?
Can you explain what a furry convention is?
We've done this before. I feel like we've talked about furries before.
You
You can
vaguely-
explain it very simply. It's like
You're almost touching him. This is like an early episode.
Furries are sexual losers. I mean, let's just call them what they are.
What are they? No, what are they?
So they cover up in a costume, right? And then
They're people who dress up as like furry animals. Stuff
And then have sex?
They experience eroticism through that. Yes.
he's like.
See, as low as I think
Reminder to
purchasing
self-
OnlyFans of active fighters is, and I don't do it, I would rather do that than this furry bullshit. You know what I mean?
Yes, that's big of you. Okay. Anyway,
Furry
on to
gets
the
some.
fights.
Yes, we're trying to talk about.
I mean, the
Ferguson.
difference
Somehow
between
you're
Mr.
furry.
Hebos and myself is that he has Emily Whitmire right here, Luke. Okay, for the rest of his life, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
You don't want to know what I'm about to say.
What is in session?
All right,
Go ahead,
fuckface.
go ahead.
You fuckface, stop. So, we're talking about Tony Ferguson taking on Paddy Pimblett. Speaking of all these fights of one generation being tasked with taking out the next one, here we are.
Such a weird one.
What do I even ask you about this fight? They are giving Paddy a fight, which, by the way, folks have noted, hey, I don't hate this fight. It's winnable for
Right.
Tony. Fair enough. It is
Yeah,
winnable for
I
Tony.
suppose.
It would. Okay. By the way, we don't actually know that, but
I have a better question.
It's a reason. Okay. Just one second. It's a reasonable thought.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it feels so nakedly like, yo, go kill this guy
Right.
off for
Yeah,
us.
it
I
does.
mean, oh my God, right?
He won't stop asking us for fights. Just go take care of him, please.
It does feel like that, honestly. I mean, I was thinking about this. Who's the comparison? Like, what have we seen that's like a Ferguson? The closest I could come up was like maybe BJ Penn, but he had like an 8-year reign of losing.
Yeah.
Like it was like,
Remember
it
they
was
served
like
him up to Yair. That
yes,
got gross.
That's what I'm saying. But it felt like that a little bit. You know, you're like, oh man, BJ, what are you doing, man? Like we remember all these days, and that's why Ferguson is crazy because he had such a long run of like being this guy in that division who you're like, you know, had a cult of personality type thing. And now here he is at this stage, and it does feel like that, 100%. The last couple of fights, I've been like, please, no more from Tony Ferguson. And here we are still doing it. And
Okay, but here's
it's
what's weird,
tough.
is that we're rightfully going to the Ferguson age and how much is left, and is this sneaky, really good matchmaking or just an inevitable setup for something really sad to
Never
happen?
been sneaky good.
But what's tied to this and no one's talking about enough is that in the great scheme of pro wrestling labels of babyface and heel, which you do need to identify who somebody is in the overall sense of pay-per-view marketing and character buildup, Paddy became an undeniable heel after he won his most recent fight when nobody thought he should have won. And he was already on the verge of being overexposed through the Molly Meatball, Dave Portnoy crossover and the running around the cage. And it was, you know, it's like at some point, at some point you got to get in there and actually win a big fight and let the critical side of your job allow you to change your perception. But the only perception we have is that he got a win he didn't deserve. He's been off a while. He had the thing with Ariel. Like, there's a lot of BS. What's going to happen if Paddy does what he's telling the media he hopes is going to happen, which is that this fight is a war,
good point,
and he
too.
just knocks
what's the best
Tony
case
the
scenario
fuck
here?
out? What does Paddy knocking out and potentially retiring Tony do to a brand that people just can't wait to see him lose and finally... He's almost like where Adrian Bruner was before the Maidana fight, where you're like, I just can't wait to see this guy finally get solved.
Yeah, it's throwing gasoline on the fire, really. I mean, honestly, it really
So
is.
he becomes
Like,
a pariah from that, or
I don't know, man.
No.
It's like, I don't know how this will, like, if he goes in there and just starts as Tony Ferguson and you know, handles the mic the way he's been doing it and stuff, it'll be very interesting to see how that shakes out, but he's already got such a strange, I felt like he was doing all the right things, and then suddenly he was doing, it felt all the wrong
It was
things.
so weird, right? Up until he did remember he won a fight.
Yeah.
I think it was the Jordan Levitt fight. And they put a microphone in his face, and maybe it was a different one. I forget which one.
I think it was before the Levitt
Before the
fight.
Levitt fight. And so he said about suicide,
Yes.
and how he had lost a
Right.
friend. And I was like, dude, this guy's stock is like at an all-time high.
I know.
And now it's like, in a completely different place.
Very strange.
Do you think it too closely with Molly Meatball and it brought him?
They
down?
were. He was
the DraftKings guy. So
I mean, that is slightly polarizing.
We haven't got to Ian Garry yet, but there's some similarities
Exactly.
there.
I was going to say this.
Yeah,
They
I
do.
want to
Which
get
is
Chuck's
that-
take on marriage and cuckold.
I bet you do. I bet you do.
Big take on that.
What I was going to say was there's just they both kind of suffered at a moment in time from overexposure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, where they were pushed way too much, way too fast, and
Yeah.
the fans revolted, somewhat fairly in certain cases, somewhat unfairly. It's not a completely one way or the other. But I was going to say, you think that if he beats Tony, it only exacerbates
I
that
think
tension.
so. At least in the short term, I think it will. And it kind of will depend. Like, we're not in the fight. We haven't seen how the lead up is. But I could see Tony being a huge rooting interest for everybody.
Dude,
right?
fans are real into him right now.
That's what I
The
mean.
pops are just Diaz level, stupid level.
So for him to get just crushed in this situation, and then depending on how he handles the mic, does he embrace this thing? Like what's going to happen? I don't know. But it's
Does
a
it win that
thankless
critical
situation.
respect,
This is a tough situation for him. This is the wrong fight to try to win fans back over. I think this is the wrong setup.
Okay,
for him.
but will it subconsciously repair the critical damage that his stock took with the win that he probably didn't deserve if he handles his business and
because-
mops the floor with Tony?
Because I think that people look at Tony as hanging on, like we're kind of talking about.
No,
I
they
think,
do. They do. Be
So I
honest.
think that if he goes in there and starts as Tony, that people are like, well, of course he's going to start. That's how
But I'm
people
saying
look at it.
subconsciously, people go, okay, well at least he's
May-
back. He's legit again. He got a win under him.
I think the UFC would believe that. They seem to be behind him regardless. I saw Dana do his podcast, and they were boys. So I feel like the UFC is Paddy's back like a while back now, but
You're talking about during the aerial, the spark the aerial.
yeah, the whole
war.
thing.
Yeah,
But I mean, I feel like
You know what
I think the UFC likes him.
Ariel. No one ever beefs with him. It's
Well,
funny.
that's what makes this sort of a story because this was the
I'm
first.
teasing.
Chuck
I'm teasing.
and me.
I do.
Here's the deal, though. What I want to ask is the flip side of that. I always say the greatest old guy win outside of Randy Couture against Tim Sylvia in that comeback, because that was a title fight. There's so much more of like Captain America tied into that, and it was a title fight.
Yeah.
But when Tito Ortiz stopped his losing streak for that one fight against
Bader.
a still
Against
credible
Bader.
Ryan Bader,
Man, remember he went into
and
that
shocked the
felt
world.
like exhilarating.
No matter if you
It was
hated
crazy.
Tito your whole life, you celebrated while he was doing one more Gravedigger, and it was like that win shouldn't have happened. But you know what? He's a legend. Good for him. This win shouldn't happen, but if it does,
Dude, the crowd's going to go bananas.
I think so.
is that what's going to happen? It's just going to be one of those
Here's the
feel-good
thing about
moments?
Ferguson, man. Like, this is what, and if I'm being serious for just a second, Tony was always an unusual guy. He was always the guy who was, marched to the beat of his own drum. But
Little red flags all the time.
little red flags
You know?
too. I mean, even on the Ultimate Fighter, when he got drunk and would lose control, there were signs back then that there were things to worry about. But in truth, he was also just an insanely dynamic fighter. The fight against RDA, I think, is probably his best, if you ask me, beating him 5 rounds in Mexico City and looking like he had all the cardio in the world to go. Just a phenomenal performance. But the fight game did him wrong, whether by bad luck or anything else. Like tripping on that cord and losing the Khabib fight, it never came.
Yeah.
Did he ever get paid $1 million for any fight? Maybe is the answer, but probably not. I don't know. He never got a chance to unify the titles. There's a lot of things that were
that's a
taken
great
from
point.
him.
And people even
And people want one last thing
I
where they
think
can
you're
say,
right.
fucking Tony
Yeah,
did that
he
shit.
got it.
Dude, his fan base was. You've been at some of his fights.
Sure.
Right? I mean, his fan base
Sure,
is
they
huge,
love him.
Man. So I do feel like that, even subconsciously, like for people, they just want to see this.
But get this isn't just any comeback win. You're beating the most recent sort of UFC-produced corporate next big thing that may or not.
That's actually the way to say
You're
it.
beating the company, even though he's not really at odds with Dana White. They've been decent in recent years. Like Tony would take a couple shots, Dana would repair it. They're letting Tony hang on a long time. But if he gets this win, he beat not just young. He didn't just get a win for old age. He beat the companies, so he would get a big fight.
He beat the guy who was the teacher's pet, or the perceived.
I'll tell you
teacher's
what,
pet.
if he beats Paddy, he gets Conor. I'm telling you that right now. If Tony Ferguson somehow beats Paddy, he will get Conor as his
I was going to ask what he gets from him aside from
would
the
be-
adoration of fans. You really believe that?
that level of a fight, yes.
Only
That
if
level of a
Conor
fight.
loses.
Like maybe instead of Conor, it ended up being like a Nate or something like he
Conor
gets
would
that
have to lose
level.
to somebody else, I think, before they would put that in.
Not if Tony beats Paddy. If Tony the best scenario is Tony takes shots, he gets dropped, it's kind of a war, but then Tony tricks him into a submission and taps him, and then he's just like,
so many
he could have a
complicated
Diaz
things.
brother
I'll
moment.
laugh my ass off if he twisters him. If he twisters
God.
him, that would be...
There's also a little bit, and this is, it'd be this moment, it'd be a celebration. I know how it's going to be if he wins, right? Exactly what you guys are talking about. But you'd also know that the inevitability of him losing badly again will exist. Like it's just gonna.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like there's always a bittersweet thing. I hate it.
Remember
when
they did
guys get in
Frankie
this
Edgar?
spot. I know.
Against
That's what I'm
Chris
saying.
Gutierrez, and you were like, this is going to go, this is going to go poorly.
I know.
Yeah.
And then, if, what's the best case scenario for them? They win. Now they think, if you talk to Tony, he's like, I'm going to go on a 5-fight win streak.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going to win the title. And you're like, oh, no, don't talk like
He's
that.
probably like, I'm going to fight Islam next. I'm going to fight. Like, yeah, he's just.
So it does prolong something, that's all.
Chuck, interestingly, tangentially, not really connected to this, will Khabib ever compete in any form of like combat that we care about again?
Visit this a lot.
We do a lot, but it's an
I
important subject because that's his long time.
don't know. There was a time where I would have said yes to this.
Mm-hmm.
He's so principled, and I just don't see it. I don't see any movement.
And
from
I guess
him.
I
don't
wouldn't
know.
accept if he does the
I'd be
grappling match.
shocked
I don't
if
count
did
it.
now.
If he does grappling, I don't count
maybe,
it.
but I'm like, coming back to UFC
No.
or something, I just don't see it at this point.
Let me ask you about the David Goggins stuff. David Goggins, a former, I think, Navy SEAL, sort of like a professional psycho where, I'm not dissing. I mean, he's...
You got to kill that.
He
inner
does
bitch,
feats
right?
of strength and endurance and
This is
whatnot
dude
that
who's,
are
like-
incredible.
Is that dude who challenges fighters? Is that what you're talking about?
No. David Goggins is the guy who Tony hired. This he does.
Oh,
the
yeah, I did
ultra
see this.
marathon.
I did see this. I know what you're talking about. Okay.
Gets to the point of
He
death.
does.
right.
He does like levels of physical exertion.
I saw
that are
you
basically
kind of saying
considered
like this does. Right, I know what you're
The
talking
thing
about.
was, it's like, why would you do something like that? And if the answer was to get into great shape, being in bad shape was never his problem, never once.
No.
And also, like, you need that fighting spirit. Like Tony's, like, if there's anything he's always had, is fighting spirit. My theory was he did that because, well, one, I don't think he made a great choice, but two, I think he was looking for some kind of spiritual journey that he could go on
so Diego
to
Sanchez, man.
self-soothe
It's like-
a little bit. Right?
I think it does feel like that to me. It feels like the Diego Sanchez. Remember the last dude he had? And the guy was...
Joshua Fabio?
Yeah, that whole thing. And not quite like that, but it's sort of like that in the sense like these guys are kind of... They've tried a lot of avenues. They found success in a lot of things they've done, and they're like, this is the next chapter, and I feel like it's going to bring this to me. You know what I mean? It feels like he's in that space.
I had to text my driver, let him know I'm still coming.
Yeah,
right?
my driver's texting me too. I just don't get the phone.
You know, if I
don't have a driver,
If I
so,
broke bro culture with you on that, I apologize. All right. Yo, what do you think about Eskimo brothers in MMA?
We used to have a couple of those, didn't we? We still got a bunch, probably.
Yeah.
Sure.
Like promoters and comedians.
Yeah.
I hope you get fired. Anyway, what was your sense about what any of that shit meant? Just the spiritual journey part?
I mean, he's that guy, though. You know, he's turning. Everybody has February birthdays. I think he turns 40 in February.
Yeah.
And he's a guy who I loved him for this reason. He was so unorthodox. You know, remember his training methods where he's just doing all kinds of weird, like he's always been kooky, and I love it. And there's a part of you that's like, well, this is Tony, man. This is what he's going to do, but. I don't put much else into it. I just feel like he's trying to find that, you know. He might be searching for something like that, you know. And maybe that's good because he's had red flags where he's had anger issues, he's had strange issues outside of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's a deeper thing to it. I don't know.
Okay, we're all just waiting for like the next loss that's big enough but not too damaging that retires him, right? We're kind of waiting for that in a way because you're right. The reward for getting a surprise win that he shouldn't in some ways is a more difficult fight and unfortunately another beating. Is there any scenario, though, where he, as much as he can say, look, and I'm going to go on a 5-fight win streak and become a champion, is really just looking
maybe
to maintain this identity and to keep doing this and becoming where Clay Guida is, where Jim Miller is, where Matt Brown is, where you're sort of better known in the end for your longevity. As much as it sounds crazy from a guy who's been stopped so many consecutive times against big names and some of them damaging, could he be a guy that lingers? Like, even Andrei Arlovsky was able to write another chapter.
Andrei Arlovsky utterly reformed his style to make it work in a very relatively speaking.
I wrote him
because you never know who's going to be the Bernard Hopkins who's able to fight at a very high level to 50. I'm not saying fight at a very high level, but Guida's 41 and he's still doing it.
What did you tell me because you've watched his last couple of fights. I know that when I was watching, I'm like, oh, it just didn't look like he had movement anymore. It looked like he was going to get hit.
His movement looks compromised.
So it's like if he did that, it'd be like a miracle turnaround at this point.
He always had issues taking punishment. He just ate it before, and now he can't really eat it the same way.
Yeah.
So in your estimation, is this lost and it's over?
I think
this is it.
I don't know what he'll do. I don't know what the UFC will do.
They may have to cut it.
But it probably should be. I mean, again, dude, I go back to, I remember, you can look at my tweets in real time. I remember the beating he took against Justin Gaethje and being like, you're not coming back from that. Not coming back from that. And
That's
then,
a good point, though. I remember that.
And dude, that fight when he was like kind of just looking off like a zombie after taking the, I mean, massive punch after massive punch, and then getting your arm stretched by Oliveira wasn't great, but getting flatlined again by Chandler. Dude, you don't come back from this shit. I'm sorry, it doesn't matter who you are. You don't come back from that.
And
so.
dude, that guy's trained so aggressively, extreme.
Too.
Yeah.
Well, he's been an extreme trainer. His comeback from that injury of tripping over that cord is
It's
just
insane.
It's inhumane. So
He'll have one of the biggest, like that's that hard story in the end. Like you're mentioning, I think you'll look back at his career, and there's such a what if. Like if he just fights Khabib in like one of those situations when they were both at the top, it would have been a lot of fun.
People even talk like this Jermell Canelo fight. I know it's boxing, but the point being it was like Charlo really underperformed, which is true, fine. But he also fought Canelo. Like he got a Canelo payday. The game did him right. Like in the end, he got the lottery ticket. He got a big cash. You know, he's got some good wins, whatever. But like he more or less is going to make out of the game okay. I don't think Tony ever got that from the fight game.
No.
I don't think the fight game ever rewarded him the way that it should have. So
and he's trying to just
That's always the ugly
take
truth,
whatever's left and double on top of each other and make something out of it. But there's nothing there. So what do we need? We need him to get stopped without taking a ton of damage. We need it to be over, right?
all right,
Or just win.
Do you need it to
retire.
be over? That's
what he could do.
Does he
too.
ever fight in the UFC
Could he do
again
that?
after this? I need you to answer that question.
yes.
Does he fight again in the UFC after this, win or lose?
Yeah.
Okay. With that in mind, we have to wrap this up because I have a train to catch,
Okay.
and so does he.
All right.
Wow.
But we have to talk about the Ian Garry and Vicente Luque fight. By the way, another generational one.
Yeah.
This one within the same team. We obviously have to start the conversation here with Ian Garry, who has been embroiled in a number of, in some cases, very stupid scandals, and other ones, very self-made ones that there is some validity to. It's a bit of a mix between the both of them. Some of them salacious. Some of them, you know, getting into the stuff about what he said about Neil Magny and kind of blowing this up and then having some repercussions, potentially anyway.
Chuck, does your wife's
child
ex
custody.
live in your house?
Not all the time, but I mean, he's there a lot. Kidding,
Okay,
of course.
not a
Kidding,
cuck.
of course.
Then you know what? Not a cuck.
Yeah.
Not a cuck.
I just want to be clear. I don't care about any of your marriages. I want you to know that. I don't give a fuck about any of your marriages. All right. But in all seriousness, here's the thing I will say: the fans have been killing him for a week now, and again, since at the time this will air, it'll have been weeks. On top of that, he has to go face all of these guys at the press conference who are only certain to light him up. I will say this: aside from the fact that you have to fight Vicente fucking Luque, which is bad enough as it is. You have to do it under insane mental pressure from your peers and the fight community. I don't know. Does he?
I don't know. It's strange because the pressure he brings onto himself is what's so weird. Yeah. Like, usually you're hyping yourself up in ways that are advantageous for you. I feel like the way he hypes himself and then the way people talk about him, it's like pressure to not fall on your face because so many people want you to. It's weird. He's got a different setup. But, man, I tell you, the guy isn't one of the... You knew these guys all the time growing up, like, everybody, he was a big, like, football player, whatever it is, good guy, like, in sports, but when you knew him, you're always like, no, I don't need to hang out with him, you know. It feels like he's got that going on.
A little too vulnerable and a little too willing to open that door to why he's so vulnerable. And then you start to see some parts of the lifestyle, and you're like, I don't know. Like, here's the thing.
It's a strange stuff.
He might be living a crazy enough lifestyle here.
Hold on.
That,
I got to talk to this guy, too. Now he's blowing me up. Sorry. I have to. Sorry, dude. I have to.
So Ian Garry might be living a wild enough lifestyle that there's some element of the pressures of this week from this buildup of almost like the fans just having a reason now in their eyes to completely turn on him. We're going to find out how special he is against Luque because this is either going to energize him, fuel him, and he is truly going to step forward into that next level with a giant statement and be like, how you like me now after everything endured. Yeah. Or it's going to be the reason for his undoing because it's so all kind of blowing up.
Dude,
on
he's
him.
either going to blow past this and make it all look like nothing, or it's going to be a cautionary tale.
Exactly. So the cautionary tale thing is the pressure, but I could see him doing the other thing, where he just goes right through Luque, and now we're like, okay, and Garry is like a player, you know?
Then we know, okay, then he's built for this, and who cares whose ex is with whom or who? I mean, if you found out, okay, seriously, I don't want to get into your marriage, and I've met your wife, and she's lovely, and she's a fantastic lady.
She likes it when we talk about it.
But if you found out, oh, honey, you're a published author, and then you're like, how to get bald guys from Colorado to impregnate you? If you found out that she had actually published that story, would you?
It's a little more specific than hers was.
Like, I hope that doesn't insult you, but I take that risk that it did.
If she didn't write that piece in 2015, it would be a lot worse. But
yeah, would that change anything? No. No, I mean. Okay, so we're not trying to seriously. We're seriously.
There's side streets.
I was about to say he was destined for that job. Yeah. It sounds like. I mean,
we're seriously not trying to get inside of the dynamics of his marriage, although they're showing us a lot. So whatever.
They are showy.
Does this though change who Ian Garry can be, because it does seem like the public, the people that weren't sure about him are like, now I have a reason. Like I said, F that guy.
People were looking for a reason to not like him. His own like Ireland, I don't feel like is behind him, like because of moving to the States and everything else. It's just every step has been very strange and very polarized.
He's also using like some of Connor's shtick too openly, and
I
like,
think,
it's like,
exactly. I think that's 100% it. It doesn't
feel authentic.
It's not quite John Jones weird, where it's like he's kind of hypocrisy, but it's like it's weird in the sense that he doesn't really. I feel like he hasn't found his lane that way.
By lane, are you talking about the Albuquerque intersection where John had to pull over after the?
That's the one. Yes, sir. But
keep going.
It was technically it was part of his 20s, so it would fall under the jurisdiction of your question. You know what I mean? Got it real good, right? Yeah.
He's feeling it. Those mules are reporting.
Woo!
You feeling those marks?
The difference between me and you is 2 Moscow mules right now. All right?
That's true.
Oh,
he's having a good time.
Yeah.
He's having a good time.
You know, the thing about Luke is, I know you think this a lot, like, will BC and LT like last? Like, we're actually really good right now. I love this man.
Yeah.
We may fight
He
on the
texts
air,
me less than ever.
but that's why.
On
We
air.
don't have to talk to each other
Harmony.
at all. It's the marriage I've dreamed of. Yeah. Okay. The thing about my marriage,
I like this is the new shtick that I like from you, is like just holding the pregnant pause.
Just
Like,
letting
holding.
this idiot talk. Just let him go.
All right.
I like
so
it.
here's the deal, Chuck. If Ian Garry passes this test and does it impressively, what the heck do we have here? Because we just talked about the division and the future players, and none of us mentioned him. I just want to say that. And it was an accident when I'm like,
Yeah, you're
when
right.
I'm
He's
like
gonna
Sean
enter that
Brady,
space.
Jack Della Maddalena, we forgot to mention him. Will this be
My guy Pizza Carroll thinks he'll be like, when we're talking about these guys, like he thinks, because he's followed Ian a lot longer, and I think he believes he's going to be
That's interesting.
skyrocketing to
I'll tell you
that
what,
spot.
man. He passes this test. He moves through it.
Yeah.
Dude, and we already
It's a
had
test
we
too, man.
just had Sean Brady, who won obviously
Right.
against Kelvin Gastelum. He wants
What
a
a
piece
great
of him.
division right
He's
now.
already got guys who wanted
I know.
who are after him, and we haven't seen him fought yet.
Dude, Luque is quietly, what is his nickname is like something like Silent Assassin, right? Or
Yes.
something. But he's very quietly put together 20 fights, 115 of them. Dude, he's 75%. He mostly finishes.
Yeah.
That's
He's
a guy,
He's
if
a
you just
freaking
pull back-
escalation, like a real escalation from
you pull back just a little on the recklessness, there might still be another run.
Right. Well, remember he had the brain health issue.
I know.
That's true.
Where we weren't even sure if he was going to come back. So
That
like,
is true.
I don't want to call this a second act, but it feels like with him, how much borrowed time is Luque on in terms of how much time he has left to fight? I don't know the answer to that. It's
crazy.
But I
I never
feel
thought
like
of that.
if he gets washed by Ian Garry, we'll see what happens. But if he does, that would almost certainly mark.
It's funny talking about it because several of the people we're talking about could be on the same ice flow. The UFC's kind of kicking out to sea, like, all right, we'll see you later, Luque. We'll see you later, Wonder Boy. We'll see you. It's weird. I didn't really put that together, but there are a lot of those matchups.
It's a lot of coming and going, or at least viewed in that way.
We have drivers that are waiting for us, but
Yes.
Luke, this prelim card is badass.
All right,
and I
quickly,
did want to
we
get
gotta
your
go through it very
quick
fast.
temperature on the featured prelim main. King Casey O'Neill and Ariane Lipski.
Oh, pants at the ankles.
Wow, man, come on. It can
Pants at the
just be fun to watch you. Wow. All right.
That's you.
Wow. I can't.
All right,
crossfire.
We have to wrap it up. This was the last of these, at least in this particular studio. So
You know
thanks
the
for
best way
watching.
to wrap it up would either be to do a shot of the Tiger.
I'm
whiskey,
going to go catch my fucking train.
or to do a little rockapella of
I'm going to let you two. I'm going to let you two crackers do it yourself.
Quarters in session.
Okay, that's Brian Campbell.
Verdict
That's Chuck
in
Mindenhall. You can
hand.
find
Thanks for having me, guys.
Hey,
Ringer MMA show every Thursday, and after big pay-per-views, we do an immediate response.
or you should go to MK shit first, but then afterwards you can go watch
What's
that
your
one.
given name? It's like Charles
George Charles Mindenhall the Fourth.
Yo, that's a white name, bro.
It is very
It's a
white.
Very.
It's also royal.
Do you think your great grandfather sold peyote?
He did peyote, but that's about it.
All right, we're done here. That's Brian Campbell. I'm Luke Thomas. That's Chuck Mindenhall. UFC 296. Enjoy the fights. We'll talk to you guys after about it on MK. Bye. Ciao.